everyone, Rascal here, and today I'm finally covering the second and final season of Centaurworld. Sorry it took me so long to get to this. I did actually finish it a while ago, but I actually ended up rewatching the show with Mom Entertainments, and she ended up enjoying the first season, so we ended up watching the second season together. And it took a while because of other things happening in real life, but we finally did get to see it. And we're actually going to cover the full thing in one video on our Pause Animation channel, so if you want to go to our Pause channel to see seasons 1 and 2 together with both of our viewing opinions, you can watch that video as well. But for me, I wanted to cover season 2 on my own channel too, because I already had covered season 1 a while back and decided, hey, the show's not so bad. I definitely want to see season 2, because at that time they only had one season, but now I get to cover the second one. And the opinion? Unfortunately, a massive disappointment. At least to me. And it's not that it was terrible, it just seemed like it was building up to be this really big, really grand series. This grand, misunderstood series. And I have said in the previous season coverage of the review that it actually ended up being a pretty brilliant show. It wasn't the best written. I mean, some things you kind of didn't care for, but they really had some creativity behind it. I did like the analogy of comedy and action no longer being blended, and it made two separate worlds. Some of the songs were pretty good. The characters were pretty lovable and enjoyable. The animation actually didn't look bad, and they knew what they were doing with it. And I really gave respects to the writers and the animators that they were actually taking something that looked like it was going to be a bad show and turning something that was unexpectedly good, especially with the season finale. Now, season 2, however, they went a completely different route. The point of season 1 had you thinking it was going to be something action-based, then it had comedy in it nearly all throughout. But then as you go further in, you see there's something dark and eerie going on beneath the surface of this colorful Centaurworld. And then at the end of the season, you're introduced to Nowhere King, who is the complete opposite of the world that he's supposed to be from. And that's what hooked me and a lot of people into watching season 2. It was like, wow, they actually went all out and had a interesting villain that was the polar opposite of the world. You had the cute and fuzzy creatures, but had a really dark and sinister villain. And then we get to season 2, and wow, what's the way to put it? They kind of don't acknowledge this anymore. I mean, the Nowhere King comes up every now and then, but he really doesn't come into play until the final 2 episodes. I kid you not. And worst off, the final episode is 1 hour. So you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a really grand epic battle to send off the series, because apparently the show got canceled. But it seems like they already had decided this was going to be the end of the story with the way it ends. So you think there's going to be something really grand to send it off, right? No. Actually, for a majority of the second season, and a lot of people had mentioned this too, the pacing is very bad. You'll have a majority of the episode just be really, really stupid. And it's not like the first season where it kind of looked like it was stupid, it looked like it was silly, but then you get to when it's like there's actually something underneath. There's a story, there's backstory to the characters, there's a reason why they're so off the wall goofy because of things that happen to them. They just want to be happy, which they actually get back into here. But the whole time they're trying to gather people in the Centaurworld for an army to battle the Nowhere King. So they actually had finally fused 2 worlds together, but Nowhere King was still around. So the main story that they kind of broke the whole point of the first season was that Horus now stays in Centaurworld to gather people to build an army. Problem is, 1, nobody wants to do it and nearly get killed, and 2, nobody there can fight, period. And it's sort of ends up being disappointing because they had a pretty good idea going. And it really doesn't get serious until it gets to the end of the series. There's actually 1 episode that is dedicated entirely to Ryder being in the human world. And she's trying to convince the general to make an army to fight the Nowhere King. And it ends up being a pretty straightforward episode. There is no cutback to the goofiness or the Centaurworld. It stays in the human world, and it's actually one of the best episodes of the season. Second best episode would be one where it's entirely all backstories. Horus ends up having this power where she can jump into people's backstories by just leaping into their minds. So she sees how each of them end up where they are. And that was their second best one, because you saw, aside from Wama Wink, you know her story, that a lot of these characters in this herd actually have been through some pretty rough things. So when they came together, they thought they had each other and they had a family. So they pretty much made up their own family with each other, and they all were ridiculed or abandoned or left out. They lost their homes, they were cast out. It's almost like watching an anime, and they found each other and made a family, and it was actually pretty interesting they did that. I wish the episode had been a little longer so they could go into more detail on how they all met up, because I felt like they kind of threw them together at the very end because it was time to wrap up the episode. But I still think that was a pretty good one. Now, when it gets to the final episode, it's 1 hour. You're thinking the whole time you're going to get some backstory on the Nowhere King, right? No, they don't. In fact, they leave everything having to do with the war and the Nowhere King to the end of the series. I kid you not, the entire hour, titled The Last Lullaby, is dedicated to the backstory of the Nowhere King, how the worlds got separated, how he turned evil, how he fell into depression, how they gotta save the day, how they have the battle, and how they defeat him. All of it is done in 1 hour in the finale. This could have been sprinkled all throughout the season, but no, they decided to just put it on at the end. And the biggest disappointment of the backstory is this. I won't spoil anything about the Nowhere King, but you get the story of how he became the Nowhere King. And it sounds pretty well written. It was pretty dark and really interesting. But two things kind of weigh it down. One, they keep putting in a bunch of songs. The final episode becomes a big musical, and there's songs almost every 5 to 10 minutes, whether it's for the story or just to throw in a song. And then the second thing that's a big issue is that the reason behind him becoming the Nowhere King almost falls flat. And it falls flat because of what's written for another character that exists in the show. They have another female writer in here. She's pretty much called the woman, basically, till the end. And you see her backstory is connected with the Nowhere King, which they had hinted in season 1. But then you get to the end, and the way it ends is pretty gruesome. I mean, they don't show anything happening. Granted, no blood, but it's part of it is a pretty dark ending for the Nowhere King, and I felt like it was unnecessary because the way it had wrapped up before the epilogue was that, okay, it's over, you can get help. But no, they act like no, this was no way to, there was no other option. They had to do it even though the danger was gone. It's like, no, they have to do what they must, and you're kind of looking at the screen like, why? You don't have to, and they do it, and it happens off screen, so you know the deed's done, and it's a pretty dark way to end the show. I mean, they still have the ending where they're singing and journeying to the new world and everything, but it seemed like they had wasted a lot of potential with it. A lot of the characters don't get a lot of screen time until the end as well. And the thing with Horse and Rider is almost erased. They had their big touch immunity in its first season. Well, now it doesn't mean as much when they get to the final episode of the series. And then they also wasted Water Baby, who they built up as one of the biggest shamans of the world. But then she kind of doesn't do anything this season either. And she also has a personality shift along with the animation shift. It seemed like a lot of the characters wanted to make the characters look more fluid, so they end up moving a lot in the show when they don't have to. And I guess they want to make it look like you're kind of watching a Disney show where it's fluidity and there's a lot of motion between everybody when they talk. But Water Baby kind of doesn't really use the powers until the end. And then she also has a personality shift halfway through. The first few episodes seem like she's being a goof, trying to sneak into the Nowhere King's castle. Then she's captured. But after she's captured, her entire personality is different. She's not tortured or anything, she's just held prisoner. she suddenly becomes a super serious character when she was kind of a blend of serious and goofy. Here she becomes just completely serious, and you could say it was because of the gravity of the situation and the Nowhere King making her serious, but no, she kind of sticks with this the whole time, and it kind of doesn't line up with her character. I almost don't really understand what was the point of that. If they had made everyone in Centaurworld a little more serious because of the impending doom, then I could see that happening. But no, everyone else is still a goofball or just don't want to do it, and she's the only one with the shift. If everyone had started to become a little bit like Horse, it probably would have worked better. Plus, there's even an entire meta episode where they don't make fun of their fans, but they kind of make fun of the ones who like Wamawink. And apparently, we weren't supposed to like Wamawink. There's an entire one where some bird tars watched first season of Centaurworld. Somehow they have Netflix. And they love the show and they love the characters, except Wamawink. And the whole running gag is no one likes Wamawink. But the problem is that I haven't seen anybody say they don't like Wamawink. I've never heard them say that. So I don't know if they were predicting people wouldn't like Wamawink or they expected us not to like Wamawink. I don't know. I personally didn't hate her. I didn't dislike her. She had one or two questionable things, but it wasn't that made me hate her character. So the whole point of that was pretty weird. So, yeah, unfortunately, Centaurworld ended up being a disappointing finale. This really could have been one of the biggest sleeper hits for animation this year. It was a pretty goofy yet interesting show. The first season, I did like it had layers. It took you by surprise. It ended up being more than what it seemed on the surface, and I liked its messages. Unfortunately, it seemed like they kind of rushed everything and decided to just end the show as is, and it's left a not so great taste in my mouth because this was a pretty interesting show and it did have an audience, and I hope that the audience didn't fall out because of how it ended. And do I recommend Centaurworld as a whole? Still, yeah, you might still like season 2. I personally didn't, and I thought it could have been way better, but it wasn't terrible. It's just wished it could have done more to improve it and build upon what they had the first season, because they had some pretty good writing talent on there. So if you have seen Centaurworld Season 2 or just the whole series in general, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy Season 2 actually, opposed to what others say? Or did you actually not like it either and wish they had done more? And if you haven't seen Centaurworld Season 2, I definitely recommend it to you so you can see how it ends. It's not long. Only episode I recommend skipping is the one having to do with the Moltars, because those seem to be just going nowhere. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later!